Halfland, an ahistorical prehistory. The Battle of the Groves. In the 166th year of the Common Reckoning, Kratinos, the king of Cadamos, ordered a contingent of troops to march down the valley of the great river and plunder the rich farmlands to the north of New Lixia. The Cadamosians and their allies had established their camp in an extensive area of olive groves situated on the high ground overlooking the farms that dotted the valley's floor. There were 150 armoured hoplites, carrying round shields and long spears. There were 150 armoured cavalrymen, equipped with oval shields and swords. There were 150 unarmoured archers. There were 100 shield-bearing armoured spear dwarves, supported by 50 unarmoured crossbow dwarves. Finally, there were 100 halflings, under the command of Magno Flagonfist. None of these halflings wore armour, and they were equipped with an assortment of light bows and slings. As dawn rose, these contingents were scattered in no particular order across the hillside, and the sleeping troops were awakened by the braying of horns and trumpets and the beating of drums, raising a clamour, sounding the alarm. Down at the foot of the slope, a New Lixian army was advancing through the fields of a small farm. For Diadromes, the tyrant of New Lixia, had not been idle. While the Cadamosians had been pillaging the countryside, he had been hastily gathering whatever forces he could. These amounted to 300 armoured infantry, equipped with sword and shield, 150 unarmoured infantry, carrying shields and slings and long, keen knives, and 150 unarmoured archers. Unlike Kratinos, who had remained in Cadamos, Diadromes chose to lead his army in person, placing himself at the head of the central column of heavy infantry, with the archers to his right and the slingers to his left. Above, among the groves, the bleary-eyed Cadamosians scrambled to form up into their units. Orders were shouted, ranks were dressed, and organisation began to emerge from chaos. Piecemeal, the various contingents started to advance toward the crest of the slope overlooking their advancing foes. The first into position were the archers on the Cadamosian right. Before them the ground fell away, before rising again to an isolated hill topped with olive trees. To their left, the leading ranks of the New Lixian heavy infantry had reached the farm buildings and were advancing through the farmyard. Beyond them, the New Lixian archers pushed forward through the fields and lined the field wall at the bottom of the slope. The Cadamosian archers descended into the valley before them, intending to take up a position on the hill opposite, from where they could threaten the New Lixian flank. But they were not alone in seeking to take this piece of high ground. Unbeknownst to them, on the far side of the hill, the New Lixian slingers had had the same idea, and it was the slingers who were the first to reach the summit. On the Cadamosian left, the cavalry and hoplites were now advancing to the edge of the plateau, directly overlooking the New Lixians in the farmyard and fields. The New Lixian archers responded by loosing a volley of arrows up the slope into the massed ranks of the Cadamosian hoplites, causing casualties and confusion, disrupting the Cadamosian formation. But the Cadamosians reformed and came on. Once more the New Lixian archers loosed a lethal storm of death at the hoplites, and once more the ranks of the Cadamosian hoplites were thrown into disorder. But the Cadamosian cavalry came to the hoplites' assistance. Observing the plight of their comrades, the horsemen charged down the slope. The cavalry crashed into the line of New Lixian archers, creating havoc. Many of the bowmen were slaughtered, and others ran in panic. On the far side of the battlefield, the new Lixian slingers now got to work. Slingshot poured down from the hilltop onto the Cadamossian archers in the valley, throwing them into disarray. But behind the Cadamossian archers, the dwarves and halflings were now forming up, and the arrival of these reinforcements gave heart to the bowmen, who reformed their lines and loosed arrows back at their tormentors, supplemented by dwarven crossbow bolts and halfling slingstones. Back by the farmhouse, Diadromes ordered his heavy infantry to charge into the flank of the Cadamossian cavalry. A sharp melee ensued, and the horsemen retreated back up the hill, closely pursued by the new Lixians. The fighting was fierce, flowing and ebbing up and down the slope. The new Lixian slingers succeeded in driving the surviving Cadamossian archers back up onto the plateau, where they joined the ranks of the dwarves and halflings, who relentlessly continued to pelt the slingers with assorted deadly missiles. And now it was the new Lixian slingers who fell back, seeking shelter behind the trees. So on their right flank, the Cadamossians were now having the better of it. Not so on their left, where the weight of the numbers of the new Lixian infantry was taking a heavy toll. This was where the battle would be won or lost, and the Cadamossians were losing it. But help was on the way. Dwarvish horns were sounded, and as the echoes reverberated in the hills, 100 spear dwarves came marching across the battlefield, marching behind the banner of Unnaskrag billowing in the morning breeze, marching to the assistance of the hard-pressed hoplites and cavalry. Behind the dwarves scampered a few reckless halflings, determined to assist in any way that they could. But would these reinforcements arrive in time? Even as the dwarves marched, the Cadamossian ranks were disintegrating. Groups of Cadamossian cavalry reeled back, fleeing from the fight. Those who stood their ground were cut down by new Lixian swords. Surely all was now lost. But dwarves are obstinate and proud of their honour. Cadamossians may run. The spear dwarves of Unnaskrag were not going to do so. Even as the new Lixians celebrated their victory, they were confronted by an advancing dwarvish shield wall, bristling with spears, and then the dwarves charged home. Dwarves are short, but their spears are long, longer than new Lixian swords. The new Lixians had the advantage of numbers, but to get within striking distance they had to pass the thrusting dwarvish spear points. Many died bravely in the attempt. The spear dwarves rampaged across the battlefield, and none could stand in their path. The new Lixian lines crumpled and then disintegrated. In the confusion, Diadromes perished, spitted on a dwarvish spear, and with that the new Lixians fled. And so it was that the spear dwarves of Unnaskrag gained their fearsome reputation amongst the Cadamossians and new Lixians, and thus ended the Battle of the Groves.